So if you are really strong, but you are carrying excess weight, that is going to increase the risk of injury in first responders and military. What we do show consistently is that exhaustion, physical exhaustion, tends to increase the risk of back pain, when lifting, I should say. And now we correlate that with what we know from military as far as cadets and recruits go. And they've done a lot of research on injury prediction in new recruits. And the only thing that they saw very strong evidence for was general cardiovascular fitness. Do a great job of staying strong. They do a really good job of getting in the gym. They lift. Most of them see that as important. If we're looking at injury prediction, the big thing that I think tends to get missed is...
Hey guys, today I am joined by Dr. Jonas. He is founder of Accelerate Sport and Rehab. He works with athletes and high performers returning to full capacity through evidence-based approaches centered around pain, confidence, and load tolerance. His work isn't about just reducing symptoms, it's about preparing to handle stress, and that's kind of what I want to explore today. Because here in EMS, our policemen, we have to carry heavy things all day long. It's just part of the job. Dr. Jonas, I really appreciate you being here today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I'm excited.
I want to start with this. Before we go back into pain and durability, what do we need to know about your early context to understand where you are today and how you think today?
Well, I think, like we kind of discussed before we jumped on, that I'm a chiropractor by trade, but I started gravitating more towards the exercise-based, strength-based rehab because when we looked at the evidence of what actually helps people stay healthy, get better, we found that exposure and strength-based applications had a really high success rate, much more so than passive. So I would say not just strength-based, but active rehabilitation, something that you are engaging in doing for and to yourself versus something that is passive being done to you, like a massage, some foam rolling, soft tissue work, chiropractic adjustments. The passive care has a place. I don't want to act like I just never do passive care, but it's an entry point when the system is sensitive, to desensitize that system so that we can, as one of my colleagues used to say, create a window of opportunity to then load. And that load may not be heavy load at first, but as we load, we are going to gain confidence and we are going to unlearn that painful pattern. Because the biggest thing that we are starting to understand more and more and more is that pain does not mean damage, right? Pain is an alarm system. It's a warning system. It's not always that accurate. And the level of pain does not necessarily coincide with the level of tissue damage that we have. Okay. So the alarm system is going to go off. And then we have to determine whether or not that's accurate or not. And that has so much to do with context of, have we had a similar injury in the past, which can both psychologically and neurologically prime our system to react stronger to a secondary event that is in essence maybe not even as bad, but because we have this memory there, the nerves, specific pain fibers, are going to fire a little bit more aggressively, and it's going to key off in memory centers in our brain, kind of like a PTSD almost. We're going to go trigger all of these areas, and we're going to have a stronger reaction afterwards. So it's really important for us to remember that psychological, the neurological, the social context. Did we have a parent that had back pain, and all they talked about was how bad their back was? And so all of a sudden, we start having back pain, which predictably, we are going to, I think it's something like 83% over the age of 45, 83% of people at some point between the age of 45 and 65 are going to have an episode of low back pain. So we've got to start rewriting this idea that we've done something wrong or it's abnormal. It's kind of a rite of passage. Like, I think maybe lower back pain is puberty for as we get older. You know, it's kind of like you're going to go through it no matter what. Keeping those things in context that this is normal to have these things happen. It doesn't necessarily mean even that you were weak or did something wrong. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. Coming through that, always been, I like to say, evidence biased, not evidence based. And I know some people will take issue with that, but evidence biased means I recognize we have evidence, but that evidence is essentially scatter plots. And we're looking for groupings in that scatter plot that say there's strong correlation here with either this intervention or with this variable that can predict or reduce or fix specific injuries. Our job as a clinician is to figure out who the patient is on that scatter plot. It is not to treat everybody as if they're the outcome of a study. It is to treat everybody as if they're an individual on this scatter plot, and we need to figure out where they lie and make sure that also we're not so biased towards the evidence that we are going to interfere with their healing by trying to enforce our belief, our bias onto the patient if they're already getting better, if they're seeing benefit. We just kind of want to steer them in a sense. So I prefer to be evidence biased, not necessarily evidence based, to make sure that I'm not taking over, that it's a collaborative effort with the patient.
Okay, that makes sense. It's more how the perception of the pain is for the patient, and how can you move from that based on the evidence.
You want to have the evidence in mind, but you also want to have the individual in mind, and you want to be respectful of it. You can't take the injury out of the individual. You have to respect the individual in front of you. And that means sometimes, case in point, if somebody comes in and they're doing something like that evidence would say is not going to help. Maybe they're using let's say they're using a TENS unit. And a TENS unit is a great way to decrease the pain in the moment, but it doesn't fix anything. Or maybe they're going to get massage and they have a disc injury. And we know that the massage is not going to change that disc. It's not going to change that compression that's occurring. But they feel better when they do it, and they want to spend their money on it. I'm not going to be so evidence-based that I'm going to go, hey, that's not helping, stop doing it.
Okay, I see what you mean.
I'm going to say, does it feel good? Yeah, okay. I don't care as long as it doesn't replace something that we know does help.
Okay.
So if you are substituting in a passive modality for an active modality, I'm going to say something. But if you are using that and it feels good and it's giving you some relief, and that relief at least lets you move around a little bit longer without pain, we're going to take it. Absolutely. And I'm not going to be so evidence-based that I'm going to take that away from you. It's like kicking a crutch out from somebody. As long as you're not hurting yourself.
Yeah.
As long as I don't feel like you're getting taken advantage of. That's the other thing. You know, if you've been sold on some package deal of some newfangled device that's $2,000, and I know for a fact it is not going to help you, I'm going to say something.
Okay.
But if it's not hurting you, if it's giving you confidence, if it's allowing you to move, like we talked about, with less pain in the moment, and you're still working towards that long-term solution, which is what you did, right? You said, okay, I'll take these mini reprieves, these windows of opportunity, but I'm also reinforcing that with the other things that I'm doing on my own, right? That's my thing.
Okay. Was there a moment, any part from your career that shifted how you viewed recovery from what you used to before?
How I viewed recovery as far as rehab, recovery from
injury or injuries or anything like that, on your main perspective on how you treat recovery or injury recovery or pain recovery.
There have been several. I think the biggest one was the realization. I was with a company for a while that had a very heavy passive care modality aspect to it, and sold that passive care as if it was a unique solution to pain and recovery. Did very well as far as resolution rates within that company, and they would actually ask me, hey, you've led the company in cervical spine over the last 2 years in resolution rate. What's your secret? And I would tell them, I don't push on people as long as you want me to. I do enough, like we said, to create that window of opportunity, but then I'm immediately going in and we're loading and we're doing active care. Because as I started to see it, the more active care we did, the more responsibility that the patient took for their own care, the better people got, the faster people got better. And in my mind, we also saw a better resolution because they had tools now. And I love seeing patients 5, 6, 7 years later where they go, hey, you remember that thing you taught me? I still do that when every once in a while I'll have a little flare up and I get my stuff out, I do that thing you taught me, I do my exercises, and it goes away. That's to me is the most rewarding thing I can hear. But that was a big turning point for me. And as I continued to look at how the research played out, we saw more and more that yes, passive care can have a place, especially in the first 6 weeks of an injury. That's acute phase of an injury. Those passive modalities, which from a business perspective, by the way, passive modalities pay very well, especially in a cash-based practice. One of the big criticisms of manual therapy is that manual therapy is very expensive because it's billed very high in insurances. And manual therapy is a very small piece in a very small window of what gets that person better. So the more I looked at the research, the more I started to push myself more towards more and more and more of the active care, of what I like to say, the self-sufficiency. And then once I got out, I really do enjoy seeing, especially when you're working on a movement pattern, And I don't like to say good or bad. I think they're all strategies. And we don't know why that strategy is there. It may be very useful, but as we're working through strategies, as somebody's getting better, when you see that light bulb go off, especially somebody that's had let's say a squat or hinge strategy that they've used for their entire life, that tends to put maybe excessive load in certain areas where, based upon a squat or a hinge, that's really not how it's designed to function. Doesn't make it good or bad, it's just how they're getting about it for whatever reason, old injuries, new injuries, whatever it is. When you see that light bulb go off and you see them go, that feels good. And I can't tell you how many CrossFitters I've worked with that have had knee or back pain, and we work on their squat, and all of a sudden they go, that feels good. I was like, yeah. I don't know that I've ever felt good when I squat. These people that are squatting lots of weight, they're like, squats have never felt good, but that feels good. It's like, yeah. To see that switch go off for whoever it is and know that they can't give that back. They can't give back the awareness of that new pattern. That is theirs. They can carry that forward. They get to keep it no matter where they go. They may never see me again in their life, but they have a different strategy now that is maybe a little bit more efficient, that is maybe better suited for their current neurology or physiology. I love that. That's cool to me, and I get excited.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like, especially somebody that you helped out. I can see the feeling you help somebody out and they come back to you with that kind of story. We don't see that in EMS. We just drop them off at the hospital and you say bye-bye.
You know what, though? You don't. And having known patients that have had to have EMS or fire or police, and having my own experience with them, I promise we remember that. They tell stories about it. The firefighters were amazing. They were so great. They checked them. The police, they were really very considerate. They were calm. People do it sucks because you're right. You kind of only hear about it if you did something wrong.
Yes.
You know, I played offensive line in football, and you only had your name called on the offensive line if there was a penalty. Nobody ever called your name on this. You know, they never called your number and name because you did something well. And I feel like you guys are kind of in the same boat. But I promise your impact is so important to those that you help. They carry you forward, even if they can't find you or tell you or let you know. And so, you know, sometimes they're unconscious. They have no idea all the work you did, but they know.
Going with that, so in EMS and everybody else, firefighters, police, they're very strong people. What do you think capable people and strong people in this industries end up with back injuries?
I think for back specifically, there are a number of different things. Number one, because we have a high probability of having back injuries over the age of 35 anyway. You're also going to take into account that you use your body in very specific, high stress, let's say unconventional ways that it's very hard to prepare for. Because you may have to reach across or do something or lift in a way that you have never actually exposed that back or those tissues to. And sometimes, like with EMS, you're sitting in a car for 90% of the shift, and then all of a sudden, you've got to jump out, spring up, and go, right? They don't usually, when you arrive on the scene, they don't usually allow you to take a lap to warm up.
No, there's not a hey, hold on, patient, let me do some stretches. We don't get any of that.
Yes. And I think that's important to recognize. There are some parts of injury that we know preparation, whether that be a dynamic warm-up, things like that, are critical to reducing injury risk. You don't get that chance. So we can understand that that's important, but we don't necessarily get the opportunity to do that. We know preparation's a big thing, so we should be trying to load these structures in appropriate ways to how they're going to be used. And that doesn't always mean an ideal way. So maybe some exposure into a lot of times we're taught to keep the spine very stiff, very rigid. Slowly and appropriately exposing it to larger ranges of motion with load is going to be important for that preparation part. But I want to circle back and talk about, again, the context of injury itself, especially low back injury. So certain types of, certain body parts, knees, shoulders, and spine, tend to have a larger psychological component to them. That doesn't mean it's all in your head. But it means that these are areas that the brain tends to put a higher priority on. And when we have pain, it amplifies that pain. And then we have multipliers, like did we have a previous injury? Again, the social aspect of it. Being around other guys that have had back injuries, and you've heard these horrific stories that they've had, and then here comes your turn. All of these things can play a part in how the body responds to threat, which is really what it's keying off on when it has pain. It may not be damage, it's threat. It's the perception that damage could occur. When we're looking at reducing those risks, I think most of the military and first responders that I know do a great job of staying strong. They do a really good job of getting in the gym. They lift. Most of them see that as important. If we're looking at injury prediction, the big thing that I think tends to get missed is, number one, it's not just about strength. It is about relative strength. That means strength relative to body weight. So if you are really strong, but you are carrying excess weight, that is going to increase the risk of injury in first responders and military. We see that pretty consistently. We know there's things that you can't control that also increase injury risk, which are like sleep deprivation. Huge. I look at you guys like athletes, and guess what? Every hour underneath 8 hours that we get, we exponentially increase the risk of injury. So trying to make sure that when we have those shifts, maybe putting a little bit more effort into our recovery. And when I say recovery, I don't mean ice baths and red light. I mean sleep, good movement, and a good diet. So sleep is gold medal when it comes to injury prevention. If we can respect it, doesn't mean, I know we can't always abide by it, but if we can respect it, try to get back some of those hours that miss, some of that recovery that miss, that deep and REM sleep that we're not getting, those things matter. When it comes to predictive, go ahead.
No, sorry, it's interesting you say that, because one of the biggest things that we lack is sleep. So you work 24 hours. If you work in bigger cities like San Antonio or Houston or Austin, Dallas, or any kind of major city, the work is 24 hours and you're pretty much guaranteed to be a stand-up 24 where you're just running nonstop. I've been there several times. And then on top of that, you add overtime, because most of us work overtime. I do agree with you 100% that sleep is imperative. Just through my research after being here for 25 years, it's one of the biggest things that I now prioritize, even if it's, taking a nap at work, or, I do the NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, whenever I'm at work, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then when I come home, my family knows that, hey, if I have a long shift, I want to go home and sleep and recover. And then I sleep for 5-6 hours, and then I go back to sleep on a regular schedule again. So it's kind of hard, because in EMS, fire, police, sleep is the first thing that goes. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, it does, and I agree. And that's why I mention it, because I like what you said there. It's like I did try, you try to carve out some opportunity to regain some of the things that you're losing. Some of those techniques, they're very good at restoring our REM sleep. I'd say restoring, for making up for lost REM sleep, which is important, because REM is a lot of times where we are going to do a lot of that repair work, and especially defragmentation, as I like to consider it. That defragmentation that occurs in the brain, especially in a high stress situation where you've got to process these events that you are going through, that REM can be really important. It doesn't necessarily make up for the deep sleep loss. And that's where our hormonal repair tends to occur. And that's why I'm coming down to going, and that happens in the first phase of sleep, by the way. That usually deep sleep's going to be not hard, it moves around. But most of our deep is going to occur in those first several hours. Most of our REM is going to occur in the latter half. So getting, like you said, I'm going to get 5-6 good hours. Maybe we get some deep into that, get a little bit of restorative, and then we can piece in some of the, whether it's meditation or mindfulness or some of these other techniques that can be used to allow that defragmentation process to occur in the brain. Really goes a long way. And I also don't want to make people feel fragile, which is saying, oh, okay, well, if I can't get sleep, I'm all apart. It's important, and I want you to respect it, and I want you to carve out time around the shifts where you can put back into that bank a little bit. But let's talk about what is in our control. And so what is in our control is, I know a lot of talk just circulates about how we lift, right? Lift with your legs, not with your back. We've done a lot of research into that. We do not have any evidence that one way of lifting is better than another. The chance of hurting your back, about the same no matter how you lift, whether it's with the legs or with a rounded back. It doesn't necessarily increase the risk of injury. But what we do show consistently is that exhaustion, physical exhaustion, tends to increase the risk of back pain, when lifting, I should say. And now we correlate that with what we know from military as far as cadets and recruits go. And they've done a lot of research on injury prediction in new recruits. And the only thing that they saw very strong evidence for was general cardiovascular fitness. And so I think if we put those two together and talk about, well, what are some things that we do have control over? I think most of the fire and first responders and military that I see have done a good job of staying strong. But your cardiovascular base is actually a huge piece of the injury prediction, prevention, and recovery process. Because a lot of what's happening on a hormonal level when we are getting better from an injury happens metabolically, and that's going to have to do with your general metabolic health. So I think one of the things that gets lost sometimes is that cardiovascular fitness is actually a big predictive factor when it comes to injury in general. It's a predictive factor when it comes to lower back pain as far as lifting goes. And it's one of the things that kind of gets missed in a lot of the firehouses and police departments that I see. They're all strong. Their relative strength to relative body weight tends to be a little low because they tend to be a little bit heavier. And their cardiovascular fitness tends to be something that gets pushed to the side.
That's so interesting. I actually never heard it from that take. I watch a lot of stuff to try to for my own health, and I stay pretty healthy, like cardiovascularly. I run, I lift, all that stuff. And I think that's one. You're right. It's one of the things that I think maybe has determined my recent 3 years of non-injuries, but I've never heard that cardiovascular fitness was something so imperative for a risk injury predictor or injury reduction, which is not incorporated. Everybody does. We'll do CrossFit or we'll do something else, but nothing specific for cardiovascular, which I kind of think now that you said it goes hand in hand with carrying the extra weight. So if you carry extra weight, even if you're strong and you carry those extra 20, 30 pounds, and then you combine it with the low cardiovascular output, that makes sense what they correlate, and you end up with bigger injuries or more injuries.
And everybody's a little bit different in what they feel good with and can carry. I know I tend to run about 215. I'm 6'4". I tend to run about 215 most of the time. Occasionally I'll bump up into the 222, 225 range. And I'm not overweight by any means. I might be somewhere between 12 and 14% body fat when I do that, and I'm trying to lift a little bit heavier. But for me, that essentially 8 to 10 pounds, I feel that. I go out and play with the kids. I go play basketball. My knees, my back, they're not painful, but I notice the extra weight. So it may be that some people just carry it differently than others. Some people just have a set point that's different than others and they're very comfortable with. But we do have to be careful, not making sure that we're not going after strength for strength's sake. Number one, strength needs to be purposeful, and it needs to be, like we said, relative to body weight is important. Sometimes we're doing it more for aesthetics than for functionality. And this is your livelihood. Aesthetics is a great motivator, don't get me wrong. Like, aesthetics is going to get us up and get us out and get us to the gym way more than feeling good usually will in the beginning. But this is y'all's livelihood. You have to make choices that prolong not only your career, but make sure that you have a life after your career. That's the biggest thing. I mean, don't make sacrifices to your body, which can't be replaced, and like you saw, may have been replaced in ways that you didn't want it to. When there's things that you can do now to start taking care of it. Degeneration, like osteoarthritis, is a great example of this. Knees and lower backs. We think about it often as this slow wear and tear process, right? The tread on the tire is just wearing out. And some of that is genetic. Some people have a predisposition to softer cartilage or a predisposition to putting calcium down in areas where it may not necessarily belong. But we're starting to see, much like aging, we think of it as this linear process that's just creeping, right? That's not what's happening at all. What's happening is we have one or two really traumatic events that tend to break down the system and accelerate those processes, if that makes sense. So spinal degeneration, knee osteoarthritis, it is not that you're just slowly wearing away at this. At some point, you have overused it in a short period of time, causing trauma, and that was never fully resolved. And this is my big thing about, if pain is not a good indicator of damage, then the lack of pain is also not a good indicator of damage. And what most people are going to do is they're going to get just better enough, right? They're going to get just better enough to feel good enough to go back to doing what they used to do. And then they'll nickel and dime this thing for 6 months to a year. Well, you do several years working through that process, And now all of a sudden, because of that initial injury, that spark that started it all, now we see that the degenerative process has taken hold. Same thing with stress. We don't age linearly. We have these big traumatic events, the death of a loved one, or a divorce, or job change, or something that tends to age us. Kids tend to age us very quickly. And then we might have periods where we don't age quite as fast. It's not a linear fashion, and neither is degeneration like that. Number one, don't sacrifice tomorrow for today. You want to do things that preserve tomorrow. And number two is making sure that if you do have an injury, you get it properly fixed. And case in point, you were talking about your back injury and the length of time that it took you to be where you are now. Most people don't understand that a disc injury, we're seeing evidence that it's probably in the 9 to 12 month mark for a disc to, if handled correctly, to resolve. It can, even a large bulge can reabsorb. I'm sure you've seen a lot of this in the research that you've done on your back. Large discs can reabsorb, they can heal, but it is a minimum 9 to 12 month process if handled correctly. What do most people do when they have a disc injury? They're going to give it about 6 weeks, because that 6 to 8 week mark is when we are pain-free enough to start doing stupid shit again.
I was guilty of that.
But right, but that's not your fault. You don't know, because what are you associating with? If the pain is better, I must be better. Let me go back out and start doing things that I used to do. And this is where a lot of these processes start. We don't really respect the tissue healing timeline, whether that is a disc or whether that is a tendon or whether that is a ligament. We don't respect the timeline. We get just better enough. It is not painful, so we'll go back and start reloading and doing all of these things. And then we don't realize it until we're 10 years down the road that we've been I look at it like a paperclip. We've been pulling on that paperclip, and all of a sudden, snap. Now we've got a much bigger problem to deal with. So making sure that we respect the timeline of the injury. That doesn't mean avoidance, and I think you can respect that too. And this is my big thing. If your recommendation is complete rest from whoever you're working with. Obviously, if you've got a broken bone, we want to stay off of that. We don't want to, but we also know now, with bone healing, that load is how cells communicate, whether it's bone, whether it's ligament, whether it's tissue. So now you're starting to see more and more protocols based upon 25% weight bearing, 50% weight bearing. They're adding weight bearing to it even during the healing process rather than taking you off of it completely. So regardless of the injury, modification is going to be key. But that modification shouldn't be linear. It should be a ramp back to activity level, back to previous output, I should say. But that ramp may be longer than you think.
It was definitely long for me. I'll give you the context of like my story and my back injury a little bit more in detail. So I was 41. I had just started going back. So I used to fly for San Antonio Airlife, and I did a bunch of stuff. And I went back to the city of Austin to work because I missed being in the ambulance. And I was lifting heavy. I was working out. I was doing CrossFit. I've always been pretty healthy. We were lifting a patient, kind of how we talked about tiredness and lack of sleep. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and this lady was stuck in the middle of her tub and the wall, and she was about maybe 400 pounds. Fire wasn't there yet, so it was just me and my partner, and we told her she was dead weight, and we told her not to move. And as we kind of shimmy this, it's a device called Mega Mover. It's really just a big tarp that we put people under with handles. It works great, but we were lifting her and she got scared and shifted her body. She shifted her body, and I just felt that twerk in my back. And I didn't think anything of it. I went home. I just did my regular stuff. I kind of stayed off of it for a couple of days, and then I was sitting down a lot, studying and doing other stuff. And I didn't know the stuff that I know now about how to prevent your back when you're sitting much. Like I have one of these that I carry on me every single time to kind of prevent my back from overextending when I'm sitting down too long. But just progressively started getting worse and worse, to the point that I had really bad radiculopathy to my right leg, painful everywhere I stepped. I couldn't sit down anywhere. I remember sitting there talking to my family as I'm laying down on the floor crying because it was just so unbearable, which in itself gave me like a lot of empathy for my patients now, that when I see that when they come for back pain, because before it used to be, it's just back pain, you're overdoing it, it's not that bad. And then I went through that and my whole perspective changed, because now, oh, you have back pain? Oh, let me get you to the doctor. How much fentanyl do you want? Just to get you
We're always cocky. I I remember the first time I had, and I was younger, but I remember the first time I had that back pain episode where you go, I can't move.
Yeah.
And you think, when people tell you that, you think, hey, you can't tough it out, just push through it. No. Your nervous system will literally shut down that area. And this is, known phenomenon. When you have that moment, you go, no, you don't understand. I'm telling it to do it. I can't move. It gives you a different perspective on back pain because we do think, you just push through. I've broken bones. You just push through it. It's totally different when you go, no, I can't move.
Especially like with us, like we go to work, like, and we kind of gotta go into it, like we have in fire police EMS, and we have this cockiness, like you said, like I'm showing to work and I have a fever. I took ibuprofen, but you're calling me for a runny nose. You're weak. It's not the same. Especially with back pain, I realized. And thankfully, some of the stuff that I learned, I now can apply it.
And you get desensitized too. You guys do get called out for stuff all the time. I know. I hear the stories where they're like, I didn't know how much Tylenol to take. They got stung by a bee, and you're like, are they allergic? No, but we didn't know how much Benadryl to give them. So there's so much. You're like, I don't belong here right now.
Yeah.
Or they just want to ride to the hospital because they know if they get in the ambulance, they'll get first.
Shelter seeking.
So you were saying, I'm sorry. So you had this, and you were sitting a ton. Which, by the way, we have context here, right? It may not have been just one event because you were studying, which means you were probably studying before this event happened too, right? You had been studying for several months before this event had happened.
Yep.
So you've been spending more time sitting in general. And this is I will tell you, my back pain, my back was never as bad as it was when I was in chiropractic college because we sat for 12 hours a day. And I had more back issues in chiropractic school. Now, this is also because you've got students cranking away on stuff, but I had more problems in back problems in chiropractic school than I did really in that cumulative 3 years than I have in the 20 years since because of the repetitive sitting, that repetitive compression and creep. Because here's the honest truth. We are not designed to sit for that long. As humans, that's not how our body is designed to do. It doesn't matter. There is no right way. We are just not designed for that much sitting, which is a hard thing for the EMS because that's your office. You are in the bucket seat of a vehicle for police as well. You're sitting so much. So we do have to respect that we're really not designed for that. Duration matters. So we may be able to sit for 8 hours. We just can't sit for 8 hours all at once.
And that's exactly what happened. When I went back and I was sitting for a long time. And then when the studying part of the job aspects, I went back. So you go through an academy for 8 weeks. So my job went from moving around and I was lifting a lot, doing CrossFit to now, a lot of my time is going to be taken for this academy and I'm going to be sitting all day. So my lifting reduced dramatically. And then I go back in the truck and within a couple of months, it's that shift, that work.
Yeah.
But with all that understanding, I don't take things lightly. Like I like to be proactive and protect myself, like in a lot of ways, not just with diet or health. So I started reading, and because I had gone to a couple of doctors and they told me that I needed surgery, or they gave me some bunch of shots, and that wasn't sitting right with me at 41. And I have heard a lot of the stories of bad outcomes, and then I did research, showing that surgeries only work about 50% of the time, maybe, and I didn't want to take that risk. So I started reading. I did a lot of research on back injuries, which led me to Dr. Stuart McGill, the back mechanic, and about his book and then about his clinical book. And then I started doing the big 3 that he incorporated. And man, I remember I couldn't do those to begin with. Like I was in so much pain trying to do those to the point that within a few weeks it started helping. I did a lot of red light therapy on my back specific, and that stopped me from taking ibuprofen all the time because I was living on ibuprofen like 4 times a day, Tylenol, ibuprofen, still going to work because my wife stays home. So it's still like I cannot stop working. And it happens to a lot of us. So little by little, I started getting ready, I started moving a little bit better. And then I did one of those stupid things that we talked about where it's like, well, I feel better. I'm going to go lift heavy now. And I remember doing a deadlift, wasn't ready, back at it again. So it was a whole entire year and a half of me going through this recovery system. And towards the end, I found barbell medicine website, and they had a back rehab where it was specific loading. Essentially what they said is just because you have a back injury doesn't mean you cannot move. And they give specific workouts that are back protective but still create strength. And with all my learning, I came up with the conclusion that it's mostly that it was going to take a long time and that I had to really, really slowly rebuild those muscles. And the point that made it the most, and you kind of mentioned a little bit about it, and I was going to ask you about it. They describe the spine as a twig. They told me that the spine is like a small twig that if you are flexible, it bends really easy, but also bends really easy, kind of like the iron that you kind of bend around and it breaks. Versus if you have a lot of strands in that spine, on that twig, becomes more of a thick branch. Yeah, it's not as mobile, but it doesn't break as easy. And that's why I started doing more of a back rehab, like more saving my back, so moving differently when I pick up something, trying to strengthen that back with core exercises. And after doing all of that stuff, I'm sitting here talking to you 3 years later, and I have not had a flare-up. Mm-hmm. I don't know what do you think? What do you take on that?
On that
the spine
analogy?
Yes.
So I would do it a little bit different. There's nothing wrong with what you've done, obviously. I mean, everything that you've done has worked, and it's valid, and it has purpose. This is a little bit more, I put this like a sunburn, okay? If you get burnt really badly, it doesn't mean you should never go out in the sun again. It means you had too much sun exposure for the amount of time that you had prepared your skin to handle that sun exposure, essentially. So you were underprepared or overexposed, however you want to look at it. They're kind of two sides of the same coin. So I would not tell a patient that had a sunburn, don't ever go out in the sun again. We know the sun is good for us. We know vitamin D is good for us. We know that a right amount of exposure is healthy. And we can also take this into skin types. Certain people have a propensity to be able to handle more sun than others. Certain people are going to have a propensity to handle more spinal flexion than others. We are, again, scatter plots. We are not a single line on a study. Some people may be very sensitive to it, just like some fair-skinned people may be very sensitive to the sun. But that does not mean that we should never get any sun whatsoever. We should take some precaution, like you said. We build up some tolerance, which is what you're doing. Look at those back exercises that you're doing, kind of like sunscreen. Hey, I'd like to get some sun, but I know I can't do a ton of sun all at once. I'm going to do some protection. But at the same time, a little bit of exposure over an appropriate period, and now we're building up tolerance to those movements. So now all of a sudden flexion becomes a movement that we can tolerate more because the body adapts. And I think that's my biggest thing, is understanding that I am not just looking at it from a muscular perspective, although I think the muscles have an important context to them. The disc, the ligaments, the spine itself has an ability to adapt, has an ability to get stronger. That disc can repair. The ligaments can get stiffer and stronger as well. Distribute that load differently. So instead of peaking like a fishing pole at one particular point, we learn to distribute that load over a greater amount of vertebra, which means we're not putting the apex at one particular point in the spine. That's also really important. So there are a lot of things that can continue to be built up. I don't want people to feel like there is a bad or dangerous movement. There are just movements that you are unprepared for, and you can learn to prepare for them. So I think of it more of a sunburn and sun exposure, and less of a don't ever go here again.
Yeah, that makes sense. On kind of moving forward with that, on your Instagram, you mention pain, confidence, capacity. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that means to you, and like where that framework work in context? Because I think a lot of times rehabilitation is really freaking simple, and we as clinicians tend to overcomplicate it for our own ego to make ourselves seem unique, both in our head and to our patients. And when it comes down to it, it is really a very basic process. No matter what you are doing, what modality you are using, or how you're treating the patient, it is going to come down to those three factors: decrease pain, increase confidence. That is confidence both on a conscious and unconscious level. So decrease pain, increase confidence, and then we build capacity. So that goes back to that idea of the sunburn, right? We are increasing the capacity for us to return to those normal activities. This is not happening. It's not a step-by-step process. These things are happening at the same time. And case in point, let's take a chiropractic adjustment, which is not realigning anything. Like, that is
not how chiropractic adjustments work. We are not putting a bone back in place, and we know that. And I think that needs to be a narrative that needs to be changed as far as chiropractic is concerned. We are creating a short-term input with a lot of proprioceptive or movement receptors that is creating a, again, window of opportunity. So we give an adjustment. You say, well, okay, maybe that's decreasing pain because that's creating this window of opportunity where pain feels less threatening and the patient moves more. Well, simply by that patient getting that adjustment and walking to their car without pain, well, now they have increased confidence. You don't necessarily have to delineate each individual thing for it to be happening. If they get adjusted and they feel better, if they get a massage and they feel better, and they walk around, just walk into their car, they've now taken 10 steps without pain, where before 10 steps was painful. We're unlearning that process, so we're increasing confidence. And now we talk about capacity. Well, there's a lot of different things that can increase capacity. That could be just, hey, throughout the day, I continue to stay on my feet longer than I was the day before. Well, if the day before I could spend 30 minutes on my feet and then it started to hurt, or 30 minutes sitting and it started to hurt, but today I can spend 45 minutes, I have increased capacity. So in my practice, I take a more direct awareness of that process into how we do every session, where we're going to, of course, decrease pain. And every session is going to get a little bit of this, but they may be weighted differently. So if you're in acute pain, we may spend a lot of time decreasing that alarm system. And then we're going to go through some gentle movements to just go, hey, try doing that thing you couldn't do a minute ago. Oh, that feels better. Great, give me 20 of those. It's not voodoo. I am just ingraining that pattern, that unlearning of pain into the system. And then we might say, hey, okay, and I always love having what I call a reward block, which is the most difficult thing that you do well. So if you're seeing me for, let's say, back pain, and right now you can't flex, but you could do extension. Well, maybe we'll go get on the Roman chair and we'll do some isometrics or some long duration holds there. Or maybe I'm going to give you a weight and I'm going to make you do box goblet squats because squats don't hurt. And I want you to know that you're not fragile. And I want you to understand that there's a lot that you can do right now if we don't ring that bell. So I want to have that reward block, but it's also, by nature of how we're loading, increasing the capacity of that tissue at the same time. So it doesn't really matter how we look at it. Decrease pain, increase confidence, and build capacity is always going to be how somebody gets better.
So yeah, goblet squats is when the barbell medicine is one of the ones that they had me do a lot with. Started with small weight, and you're right, it gave me confidence that I could do more and that I wasn't broken.
You need that, especially number one, when you're feeling really fragile, but number two, after something like this, just knowing that if you needed to lift heavy weight, you start going, all right, my back may be a little sensitive right now, but I'm still the person I was without this injury. I've got lots left to take advantage of.
It made me realize that it wasn't a life sentence.
That's why I love it. That's why I call it the reward block. Like, prove to them that there's still a lot of body left.
This is just something I'm seeing at work recently, now that I'm getting older. I used to be the young one and like I'm unbreakable, right? What do you think separates somebody that lasts 20 years in the work versus somebody that breaks at year 5 or year 10? And can somebody become durable at 40, rather than 25?
Okay, so let's take the first part of that because I like the second part. I want to come back to that. I think that's important. What separates somebody that crashes out at 5 years and somebody that sticks with it for 20? Well, I mean, first we could easily say a little bit of luck. Right? Because there can be some things that happen there. Luck and circumstance can play a part in it. I think a lot of it also probably has to do with the support that they have, both at home and within the whatever system that they're working with. If they have a system and whether it is a department, whatever it is, that they feel really supported and they know that if something comes up, they can voice that. They have some autonomy and some control. I think that matters quite a bit. I think if everything's happening to them, then they're going to burn out really quickly. If they feel like they have a say, somehow, some way, that's going to extend for humans in any situation. Do I feel like I have control over the situation? But talking physically, I think a lot of that has to do with how willing they are to be proactive when things come up. In other words, how much they respect their body. But also, what is the social and the environment around them, both past and present, on longevity, on career, all of these things, right? Do they have examples of people that have made it and have taken care of themselves and show them how to take care, like you are, of these things? Are they maybe already investing? I mean, look at it like a 401k or your retirement. Like if you started at 20, we'd probably both have a lot more money if we had started saving up
Definitely.
a lot. So those things also matter. Are they putting in early, which means they're going to have more to get out of it later on? Now, did that kind of answer the question, or did you want something more specific there?
No, I think that works.
Going to can somebody starting later build robustness? Absolutely. The idea that we have to always get worse as we age, I think you stand as a testament to this, and so do I. I feel better physically at 45 than I did at 35. Now, I love the people that tell me I'm 45 and I've never felt better in my life, because I think those people must have been just absolutely in terrible shape when they were 20, because 20 was a wonderful time. We could do whatever we wanted to our body when we were that young. But I think 35 is right around the time where you start having to make choices. Am I going to invest in myself? Am I going to start putting in the work consistently? And that's the biggest thing. Consistency beats intensity almost every time. Am I going to start putting into my body consistent work to improve? Or am I not? Am I going to succumb to the what would be the term? Our instinct of just getting by and immediate gratification, and allow this to deteriorate. But I tell people all the time, you can feel better next year than you do this year, but you have to make different choices this year than you did last year. And you're a great example of that. I hope you don't feel like, you said 41.
No, my injury was at 41. I'm going to be 46 in July.
46. Perfect. Yeah. As good as you feel right now, yes, next year you can feel even better than this. If you continue to expand, like we talked about, physically, emotionally, mentally, if you continue to expand on what you've been doing and try to push, not in big, huge jumps, but in slow increments as you go, you absolutely can feel better, have healthier tissue. We're now showing that cartilage can regenerate. We're now showing that the idea that if we had a tendon tear, that tendon never fully repairs. We're rewriting what we know about tissue. So we absolutely can make improvements long term.
I didn't know that cartilage could recover or regenerate like that. Wow. If somebody has 3 hours per week, what should they focus, or what should they obsess the most to kind of implement the principles that we talked about? I'm
actually going to throw a curveball into this, because I think number one, you want to shore up your weaknesses. Play to your strengths, but shore up your weaknesses. So if you're already strong and you maintain strength very easily, maybe you need to start giving a little bit more of that time towards something else. Not all of it, but some of it, right? On the other side of that, you need to make sure that you're doing something, and this is important, that you actually enjoy doing. So I can sit here, I think optimized is way overused, because then you start making people think that if they're not doing something in a very specific way, as far as a specific type of cardio, or HIIT, or long duration steady state cardio, or high volume, low load, or high load, low volume lifting, whatever it is, right? We get in way too many debates online about optimal. And most of the time, we're quibbling over a 3 to 5% statistical significance between these different variables, right? These different outcomes. It is not as much as we want to make it out to be. But what will matter is if you're doing high intensity cardio and you absolutely hate high intensity cardio, but you love going for a walk with your wife and the dogs, go for a walk with your wife and the dogs. Baby, push yourself a little bit more intensely or a little bit longer duration. But guess what? Number one, years ago, and I haven't seen any repeats of this study, but years ago they did a study in rats where they forced them to run on a wheel. And what they found was if they forced the rats to exercise, they did not see the same changes and positive improvements in their cardiovascular system as they did if they did it on their own free will. Because they didn't get the endorphin release, they didn't get all of the cardiovascular benefits, because it is just seen as stress. So if you're doing something that you hate, number one, you're probably not going to get the same benefit out of it. Number two, you're not going to stick with it. So my thing is, if you're trying to plot out 3 hours, you start with where you're at. You find an entry point that you enjoy. Because especially in y'all's line of work, you don't get a lot of freedom. You don't get a lot of choice. You don't get to choose things that you want to do. Your life is built upon have to, whether that is military, police, fire. So I think it's more important to talk about finding things that you enjoy doing, entry points that you enjoy, And ways, if you like going to the gym and doing, I'm much more old school, kind of the bodybuilding gym type. That was just what I grew up with. That is what I enjoy. I'm not going to go do a bunch of CrossFit stuff, not because I think CrossFit's bad, but because I know for me, that feels like more work. So if you have 3 hours, number one, shore up your weaknesses. Number two, make sure that you are choosing something that actually gives you joy and enjoyment, and that you're going to be consistent with for a long period of time. Because just like you saw with your back, it did not happen overnight. It took years. Just like with the investment we talked about with like the 401k, it takes years. So if you were thinking, I'm going to do this for 6 weeks, but you hate it, you're definitely not going to do it for 8. You're not going to do it for 12. You're not going to do it for a year. So who cares that you did it for that 6 weeks? It means very little. Find things that you enjoy doing, shore up your weaknesses, and make sure that it's something that you can consistently, like we said, add to, improve on, build on over the long term.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you know, it doesn't really matter if you need to do something. If you don't enjoy it, the likelihood is that you're not going to stick with it, and then you're not going to go anywhere. My wife's trying to get me to wake up in the morning and get the sunlight and put my feet on the ground, and I can't, like barefoot on the ground just to get some, wake up with the sunlight. I'm struggling to do it, but I'm doing it because it feels really good afterwards.
Well, but also I would think there's a little pushback there too, because your whole life has been built upon jumping out of bed and being on. The idea of being able, and this, and don't tell your wife I'm telling you this, but the idea of you being able to wake up relaxed, not shot out of a cannon, not with something to go do, not with an agenda, especially for somebody that has had sleep issues or sleep architect issues for a long time. There may be a point where you're ready to add that back in, but you're also still trying to rebuild a nervous system that for a long time has been under high stress, high load, high intensity, and teaching it to wake up appropriately. Do you sleep 8 hours, or do you still tend to sleep in shorter 6 to 7 hour shifts?
It's shorter, so
yeah,
definitely shorter. Like when I'm home, I do good 9 hours, but whenever I'm at work, it's usually between 2, 3, 4 hours.
Yeah. So some of it, I would say, there's nothing wrong with getting out and putting your feet down, but being able to take that moment to not jump up and do something, to wake up and hear that there's birds outside. I mean, that sounds silly, but like if you've been in a field where you've not paid attention to that, you've not had the pleasure of waking up gradually, there's a benefit to that, and into reprogramming the nervous system on how it takes on the day. Because if your day starts with I have to get up, well, now you're automatically shifting into sympathetic, and you're going back into that system and pulling off of that system that you've already taxed.
I never thought about it that way.
I think some of it that resistance, that doesn't mean you don't do it, but the resistance may not be because you just don't like it. It may be because that's you going, what's this peace I feel right now? What is this calmness I feel? I enjoy that. Maybe I'm just going to savor it. It's like a cup of coffee. I'm just going to savor this instead of feeling like I've got to hit it and go. Just perspective.
I'm gonna start closing it up. I'm gonna give you my typical close up. I do Tim Ferriss style questions, and it'll just be 5 quick questions. What belief about back pain have you changed your mind over the last 5 years?
This would be a good one. I came from this idea that if we protect something, if we immobilize it or brace it, it's bad. And I have completely changed my mind on that. If you have a severe lower back episode, right? Number one, we show that back bracing, in those moments, not long term, but just like if we sprain our ankle, if we brace temporarily, not only there's this thought you're going to make your back weaker. That's not what the research shows. In fact, it says the opposite. The back actually gets stronger. But this is because the weakness that we're seeing is not true weakness. The weakness that we're seeing is a response to pain. Kind of like that whole thing we talked about where the brain says, you're not moving, because it shuts those muscles off. Nope, you're not moving. So I have completely changed my mind on bracing for acute back pain as a temporary solution, a crutch, as you would say, to get out of those acute phases faster. Because again, it's learned and unlearned. So if you're just forcing it to be tough, or because you've heard that wearing that brace is going to make you weaker, you're forcing yourself to walk and to move and to ring that pain bell constantly because you're being stubborn. That's not going to get you there faster. Whereas if you could take a couple of days, maybe it's a week, but a couple of days to use that support. And all of a sudden your brain goes, I feel pretty good. Hey, I'm feeling safer, guys. Maybe it's not as big of a deal as I thought it was. Maybe I overreacted. That is actually, from what we are seeing with the research, a good thing and can have positive effects long term. Now, just like crutches, if you wear them for the rest of if you use crutches the rest of your life, that's not good. But if you break your leg, use some crutches. Don't be stuck. Don't walk around on that broken leg. Same thing. I've changed my mind on bracing.
What habit has most protected your own durability?
Abstinence.
Abstinence?
Obstinance, not abstinence, obstinance. I'm stubborn and I'm also very self-reliant. So I may not get it quickly, but I'm going to get it eventually. And I'm going to continue to try to improve, whether that is, like we've talked about, mentally, emotionally, physically. I think aging is a wonderful part of life. I can't imagine being stuck as who I was at 25 or 35. And what has helped me the most get to where I am is a little bit of perfectionism, in that I don't like making the same mistake twice, but also that I'm going to continue, even if I'm going to complain, even if I'm going to kick my feet a little bit and drag myself, I'm still going to move forward. I have that obstinance in me that says it's okay to complain, but we still got to do it.
If a 22-year-old paramedic, EMT, firefighter asked you, how do I protect my body for, we kind of talked about this, but how do I protect my body for a 20-year career? What is the first thing you tell them?
Start paying in now. Start listening to it now, and don't ignore when those signals go on. It doesn't necessarily, like we said, doesn't mean damage. Pain doesn't mean damage, but it is an alarm system that needs to be respected. And make sure that you are dealing with these little nagging injuries when they come up. Fix them right. Don't just slap Band-Aids on them. It's like having a car that you just keep trying to, every day you go and charge the battery. Like, well, maybe it's time to actually replace that battery. Don't keep charging it every day. That's not a very effective way to get through life. Same thing there. Pay into it now and respect that those little things do add up over time.
What is one question you think you wish people asked you more often?
A question that I wish people asked me more often. I think your question that you asked was great. Can I actually be better and continue to improve over time? I had one patient came in recently with lower back pain, and on a completely different topic, he went, can I dunk still? Have you ever dunked? He's like, why? I did in high school, but could I dunk again? It's like, and he's in his 40s. So, yeah, you could. He's strong. He's physically capable. But if his goal is to go dunk in 6 weeks, he's probably 40, 50 pounds overweight. I'm going to tell you, no, you're going to, at best, have really nasty patellar tendonitis, and at worst, you're going to blow out an Achilles. But that doesn't mean you can't dunk. Most of us are just not willing to put in the time and effort to get to that goal, because dunking is abstract and that doesn't really matter to us. But I like your question. Can I feel better going forward than I do now? Or is it kind of an inevitable process? Entropy is just going to take over. No, you have control, and it's a sliding scale. So if you start now, then how far you can improve, or how far you're going to degenerate or feel worse. Here's your ceiling, here's your floor, right? Well, if you start now, you've got a bigger ceiling and a higher floor than if you start later. So yes, there's limitations that matter, but absolutely you can improve.
Jonas, thank you so much for coming on today. I learned a lot today, more than reading all the books. Definitely very interesting points you take.
I appreciate that. I'm glad. Yeah.
Where can people find you here in New Braunfels or online? Yeah.
So accelerateinb.com is my website. Accelerate Sport and Spine is where I am at. And I designed Accelerate Sport and Spine to be a gym for high performers, a gym, I should say, a looks like a gym. It's rehab for higher performers, because just like you talked about with the 400-pound patient, what you have to put your body through is far more than you're going to get with band work or even body weight, to be quite honest with you. You need to be able to load those structures at the same level that you're going to be using them. You need to be prepared. And so we designed Accelerate to be just that. Most of my patients are either high performance athletes, 10 to 25-year-old, or they're active adults. The goal is nobody wants to, if you're like you, and you've got to get back to lifting 400-pound patients, you don't want to go do rehab next to grandma on the hand bike. I love that they have rehab for grandma on the hand bike, but that's not where you belong. you belong somewhere that's going to prepare you for what you are trying to do. So I'm also on Instagram. It's at the Dr. Jonas, and I think we have a Facebook too. I don't like social media. It's painful, but I'm there. I'm doing it.
Well, and in that case, I even thank you more since agreeing to do this, because this will be on YouTube.
I never mind getting the message out there. I really, like I always tell my patients, I want to keep you out of my office. I really do.
Cool. Well, again, thanks so much. I appreciate it. You guys listening, if you're in the area, you know where to find them. Highly recommend them. I know that if something happens to me, I'm going to be in your office.
Come holler at me. You've got my contact. Please, by all means, let me know how I can help get you back out there quickly.
Perfect. Thank you guys. Have a good one.